Cannabis Common Sense, the show that tells the truth about marijuana and the politics behind its prohibition.
Hello and welcome to another exciting edition of Cannabis Common Sense. We have a great show for you tonight. We have the second half of our panel of experts on medical, marijuana, and veterans affairs. So we'll have Michael Kravitz in Virginia, Al Byrne in Florida, Jason Hanley in Hawaii, Pearson Crosby in Alaska. So stay tuned for that. We have our Hemp News segment tonight, and we'll be back after our infamous Dancing Cannabis Leaves.
I feel the force.
First story tonight's from right here in Oregon. Oregon's Governor Tina Kotek announced this week that the state cannabis companies must now prove that they paid their state taxes before they can receive a license or have their existing licenses renewed. Data from the State Department of Revenue show that cannabis retailers have a higher non-compliance rate in Oregon for the payment of taxes, about 9% non-compliant, than other tax programs administered by the agency at 3%. The Oregon Liquor and Cannabis Commission, or OLCC, has indicated that there are approximately 823 licensees that would need to obtain tax compliance certificates in any given year. The change comes following reports that embattled cannabis company La Mota was allowed to expand across the state while owing more than $1.5 million in unpaid state taxes. La Mota is the company that had employed former Secretary of State Shemaiah Fagan as a business consultant. Fagan ultimately quit the consulting gig and resigned as Oregon Secretary of State because of that. In a statement, Governor Kotek said the new rules, quote, will help ensure that all businesses are operating under the same rules and not getting any competitive advantage if they haven't paid their taxes, end quote. In a statement, Craig Prenz, the OLCC's interim executive director, described Oregon's cannabis industry as, quote, important to the state's economy. The sales tax it generates is vital to the state's budget. That's why it's critically important for us to get this group of licensees into compliance and paying their fair share, end quote. In the Midwest, advocates in Nebraska on Thursday filed paperwork to begin a petition drive to get a medical cannabis legalization question in the 2024 ballot. In 2020, a medical cannabis initiative did qualify for the ballot, but was thrown out by the state Supreme Court that ruled it violated Nebraska's single subject rule for ballot initiatives. The renewed effort consists of two petitions, one to set up the doctor-patient system and one to regulate the industry. Krista Eggers, a spokeswoman for the group, said that the effort starting earlier this year than in previous efforts as they hope to gather the more than 100,000 signatures required. She said, quote, we have no choice but to keep petitioning our government. The legislature refuses to act despite the will of over 80% of Nebraskans from all parties, regions, agents, and ages supporting this, end quote. I went back to Nebraska and testified before the Nebraska unicameral legislature along with Dr. Rachel Knox back in 2017. In 2021, a medical cannabis legalization bill came within 2 votes of overcoming a filibuster and being approved by lawmakers. A bill introduced this year in the state Senate has not advanced out of committee. Advocates in Nebraska pushed for reforms over the last 8 years, but have not been able to get support from a majority of lawmakers. Federal law enforcement agents and their partners seized nearly 5.7 million cultivated marijuana plants in 2022, according to annual data compiled by the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration. According to the figures published in the DEA's Domestic Cannabis Eradication Suppression Program statistical report, agents and their partners confiscated approximately 5.7 million cultivated cannabis plants last year, a slight increase of 3% over 2021. The agents also reported confiscating nearly 37,000 THC-infused edible products and another 60,000 cannabis concentrates. This is the highest annual seizure total reported by the agency since 2011. Cannabis-related seizures largely fell from 2012 to 2020, before increasing sharply in 2021. As in past years, the overwhelming percentage of all DEA-related seizures, about 88%, and arrests, about 52%, took place in California. Despite adult use cannabis being legal in California, it continues to serve as primary provider of unregulated cannabis throughout the United States. In addition, California's high tax rates and municipal bans on cannabis retailers have made it difficult for the legal market to supplant the unregulated marijuana marketplace. Law enforcement officers also reported confiscating large quantities of cultivated plants in Oklahoma, Kentucky, and West Virginia. The adult use of cannabis remains prohibited in all three of those states. The reasons we're still seeing relatively high levels of marijuana eradication and interdiction are simple. Despite considerable state-level progress, more than half of all U.S. states continue to ban regulated adult-use cannabis markets. Furthermore, the federal government overtaxes state-licensed cannabis businesses and makes it extremely difficult for them to access basic financial services so they can better compete with unregulated operators. Spending billions of taxpayers' dollars to enforce federal cannabis prohibition, putting law enforcement officers in unnecessary danger, and hampering the implementation and effectiveness of state-regulated markets are clearly not the answers to this issue. Rather, the federal and state government should work toward further sensible policies that facilitate regulated cannabis markets and work to repair the harms caused by nearly a century of prohibition. DEA agents and their partners made far fewer cannabis arrests in 2022 as compared to the prior year. The agency reported making 5,061 marijuana-related arrests in 2022, a 24% decline over the prior year's total. Federal agents and their local partners also reported seizing $45 million of assets in 2021, a figure that's less than half the total for 2020. On the medical front, cannabis use is not associated with an elevated risk of chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, or COPD, even among those possessing a clinically high risk for developing the disease, according to longitudinal data published in the journal Chronic Obstructive Pulmonary Diseases. A team of investigators led by researchers at the University of California at Los Angeles assessed the relationship between cannabis use and COPD development in a cohort of older subjects who either smoked or formerly smoked tobacco cigarettes. They determined that neither former nor current cannabis smoking was associated with evidence of COPD progression or its development. The findings are consistent with a pair of studies concluding that cannabis inhalation, even long-term, is not positively associated with COPD, lung cancer, or irreversible airway damage. The use of vaporization technology, which heats herbal cannabis to a set temperature below the point of combustion, is associated with a reduced exposure to toxic gases and has been identified as a safe and effective cannabis delivery device in clinical trial settings. An abstract of this study, the impact of marijuana smoking on COPD progression in a cohort of middle-aged and older persons, appears in this month's edition of Chronic Obstructive Pulmonary Diseases. Our last story tonight is from Down Under in Australia. Patients suffering from pain, cancer, anxiety, and insomnia reported significant sustained improvements in their health-related quality of life following the use of cannabis products, according to observational data published in the Journal of Australian Medical Associations Network Open. Australian researchers evaluated cannabis-related outcomes in a cohort of more than 3,100 patients authorized to use medical cannabis. Under Australian laws, physicians may only authorize cannabis products to patients unresponsive to conventional prescription treatments. Consistent with numerous other studies, the authors reported, quote, patients using medical cannabis reported improvements in health-related quality of life, which were mostly sustained over time. Adverse events were not reported, end quote. Observational trial data from a cohort of nearly 3,000 chronically ill patients in the United Kingdom also recently reported that the use of medical cannabis products is well tolerated and improves subjects' health-related quality of life. This study, Assessment of Medical Cannabis and Health-Related Quality of Life, appears in the Journal of the Australian Medical Associations Network Open. That's the end of our Hemp News segment tonight. We have a great show for you coming up, the conclusion of our two-part interview across the nation from Alaska and Hawaii to Virginia and Florida. So stay tuned for that. If you or a loved one need help finding a doctor who can help you get a medical marijuana permit, call us at 503-235-4606. That's 503-235-4606. Thanks for watching and help us restore hemp. Good night.
Hey, I want to welcome you back to Cannabis Common Sense. We have a great panel tonight, both in studio and across the world. We have right here Willie T., who is a psilocybin facilitator, and Paula Noel McVie, who works with cannabis and suppository use of cannabis is your specialty. And then on the Zoom, we have Al Byrne in Florida, who is a longtime activist and started Patients Out of Time and done tons of things. We have Michael Kravitz in Virginia, who's a legend in his own time in terms of changing the world law in the United Nations on cannabis. We have Pearson Crosby with the Veterans Council in in Fairbanks, Alaska. Also started one of the first cannabis delivery businesses in Alaska. And Jeanette Small, last but not least, here in Bend, Oregon, who is also, like Willie T., a recent graduate of the very first program for psilocybin therapy. So let's talk about the endocannabinoid system and how it affects veterans and healthcare and our bodies. Paula Noel McVie has her doctorate in indigenous studies, but you've been working with patients using cannabis in a suppository method. Do you want to talk about how that has helped patients in general?
Yeah, sure. Well, my background in research is in decolonization and indigenous science and recovery of indigenous minds. So the approach that I take is bringing forward the knowledge that we carry, and all of us have clans and tribes and knowledge of plant medicine within us. So for me, when I work with someone, I'm bringing that knowledge forward. And I'm also working with somebody that has symptoms that are very specific to them. So I cannot take an approach and give it to you and you and you and you just because you all have multiple sclerosis. Each person has specific nuances of what works for them. So all of us have an endocannabinoid system. And I just recently started talking about it to my teenagers because I wanted them to know about a system of the body that I feel is the most important system, because it is the one that really houses and creates balance for all of the other systems of the body. So there have been many of us who have seen online where people with Parkinson's, they put a drop of oil under their tongue and then they stop tremoring, they can sit still and they can start talking. That's because that endocannabinoid system has been nourished. So when I think about the endocannabinoid system, I think about feeding it nutrition like I would the vascular condition, or the vascular system, like with the heart, or we have things like diabetes. It's like nutrition is so important. So the endocannabinoid system is a system of the body that creates balance. It's homeostasis. So if we don't activate that system and we don't use that system, depending on your genetic mutations and what you manifest for your conditions or your challenges, that's what's going to come forward. And then we also have the added bonus of our environment. Our life, the stress, the events, the sexual trauma, the domestic violence, everything that vets go through. It's like that's another layer on top of it all. So if we're carrying on in life without our endocannabinoid system getting nourished, we're going to manifest these symptoms and these things. So when I work with people, I work with each person's story. I listen to their story, the layers of what they've been through, and then I can fine-tune what will work for them. What are you comfortable with? Now, many people are not necessarily comfortable with using a suppository. So we talk about that. We explain the methodology, how it goes in, what the protocol is to make you comfortable. And I'm very comfortable talking about it because I've suffered, and cannabis suppositories were the only thing that got me through my suffering. So I'm comfortable talking about it. If that makes somebody else comfortable, all the better. So there's suppositories which create no head high in the body. It does not reach the liver to get to the brain through the first pass. So it goes directly into the bloodstream. And within 10 to 15 minutes, the body from the neck down has relief. And that relief can be me not focusing on my suffering for 2 seconds. So I can get that pause to realize, wow, what can I do to help myself heal? So that's really the gift of the suppository, is that it allows the body to calm down, whether it's cramps, restless legs, all the things that keep us up through the insomnias, even through nights, through night terrors and dreams, which many of us with trauma have gone through. It gives the body an opportunity to calm down. You can put in 250 milligrams. Now that's a good strong dose. If you ate 250 milligrams, you would probably be in the ER. So it really is a way to heal the body, especially for people with severe trauma. It will allow the body to calm down so it can get rest at night. And then there's other methodologies. Smoking is one route. It's like an aspirin. There's a tincture, which again goes directly to the bloodstream. It acts quickly. It's easy to dose. There's topicals, my favorite, and the all-around thing that most people comfortably can start with, like my dad, elders, children. People can interact with cannabis and use it through a topical. So it depends on what you deal with. One vet, one elder, one child, everybody might have gone through something together, but how they navigate that, and what their symptoms are, and how to work with those symptoms is specific to each person. So that's kind of my approach to it. That's my way of working with people, and I think that's how we can begin to heal a system of the body that has been greatly neglected. And I would love to see a study on, utilizing the endocannabinoid system to heal vets. Like,
I think it's really amazing how, our bodies heal, our bodies have all the tools to heal ourselves. And, doctors, they can, prepare a wound that's been cut and, provide the best skills, the best, area for the wound to heal, but all the healing happens in ourselves. And so, like when you slow your body down and you can take that time for your body to heal, it really has such benefits. And it's the same with the psilocybin, it's the same with the mental help on that. It really helps your mind heal and helps your mind, come to a place where it can start to heal itself. And, as a guide too, as a psilocybin facilitator, we're just a guide to kind of help people through that process. And I think it's really amazing what you're doing with the endocannabinoid system, and
well, and the combination of
both
the two.
of these together.
Can you imagine popping in a suppository and then going into a session? That's rocket science.
That's rocket science.
I want to address the endocannabinoid system for just a second, because I work with a lot of doctors across the United States, and recently a lot of doctors have said that CBG, or cannabidiol, has many of the medicinal properties, and it's the mother cannabinoid, the one that cannabis first produces, but it has many of the properties of both CBD and THC. But the endocannabinoid system is in all mammals and other life forms, and it runs retrograde to the rest of the neurosystem. There's a flow of through the neurons and through the synapses of the chemicals, and cannabis and the endocannabinoid system goes in the opposite direction. It's the only neurotransmitter that's been shown to run in the opposite direction of the rest of the system, and it's kind of the guide that tells and establishes that homeostasis, the natural balance of the body. But one thing that I like to point out to people who wonder about the danger of cannabis, or the danger it might cause children with developing brains, is that when women first have a baby and start to lactate, before the milk will start to flow, the first thing that comes out is called colostrum. And colostrum is mostly endocannabinoids. So the mother is giving the baby a big dose of oral endocannabinoids, and at the same time, it's in that process where the mother is transferring her immune system to the baby. And so if the mother doesn't breastfeed, the baby's immunocompromised, basically, because they don't get that mother's protection. But cannabis is tied in many different ways. And let's go on back to our Zoom audience out there. Michael Kravitz, welcome back on the show. What do you think about the endocannabinoid system and its many benefits?
Well, I'm going to have to get up for a second here and plug in. I just realized my batteries are running low, but I'll talk for a second. I actually studied, I guess you'd say, at least what I remember most about the endogenous cannabinoid receptor system as it relates to our work. I guess there's two doctors that come up. One, very quickly, was Dr. Meshulam, who I think it was one of the Patients at a Time meetings that we had. He explained the memory eraser function. And understanding how cannabinoids work in the memory eraser function, I'll just leave it at that. Go to YouTube and watch the Dr. Meshulam explain. I could never try to duplicate that. The memory eraser function, extremely important. And without it, you wouldn't be able to survive. I mean, it's a very key function in your day-to-day survival. And the other thing that I think really drove my work in a way was Dr. Mikaria's work. And it was the understanding of the relationship between pain medication and cannabis working as an adjunct, working to make each other work more effectively. And Dr. Mikaria's work, he had thousands of patients, And the vast majority of them were treating some sort of painful condition, and the majority of them were actually still using some sort of medication from the pharmacy as well. So, a combination, not just cannabis or the other pharmaceutical medications. And from that, I surmised that there were like two freight trains were going to run into each other. I mean, here you had this increasing number of people that were out there using medicinal cannabis, and it's an increasing number that I learned from all our work in the groundwork in the drug policy reform movement. This increasing drug war was scaring doctors and causing them to overreact and make you fill out what was called pain contracts, which is nothing but a written threat to take away your medication under certain circumstances. That's under no circumstance should ever be called a contract. But that was and still is a threat to patients that they would be fired from their clinic and no longer be able to access their pain treatment, that they're trying to reduce the amount of pain medication they're using by using cannabis, and then they would wind up being forced with a choice. And it's a very difficult choice to make. And most patients are going to wind up taking the pain medicine and foregoing the cannabis. Or they're going to wind up taking the cannabis and wind up going to the street. And either one of those is a bad outcome that you really don't want to have. My work is going into the VA hospitals really as a battleground to fight that pain contract, because I couldn't see fighting it out in the regular world, because doctors have such latitude as individual citizens as to what rules they make in their clinic, but the VA doesn't. And I made a couple of mistakes. I thought we would go through the VA system and it would be all about constitutional rights. It wasn't. It's about standards of ethics, medical ethics. But it's unethical to take away anybody's pain treatment or any medical treatment as punishment. So punitive denial of treatment, which is what it is. If you violate this and I take away, that's not medical. That's not a medical decision. That's punitive. And a punitive discharge would be unethical. I really worked through that whole thing trying to find a way to just create an educational platform to teach doctors throughout the country that this was the case. I didn't really expect it to work out the way it did, but with Marty Chilcott's help out in Michigan and Al Burns' help, and then in Virginia, we managed to parlay that into a VA medical marijuana policy back in 2010. And that policy stands till to this day. It's still active in the VA, giving veterans protection to use cannabis under state law, even though it's still illegal under federal law, and not only face no reprisals because they never should have anyway, it was unethical, but they have a document that will protect them, which, as you know, in this world, you need that. So it's kind of a really important piece, a puzzle piece. One of the more important pieces that I've ever worked on. I'm sure it'll be one of the more important things I've ever done.
Yeah, having the rule there in place to protect the medical professionals is very important, and I think getting those licenses out in the hands of patients across the country has changed the whole dynamic. So, Al Byrne, what are you thankful for with the endocannabinoid system and its help for patients and their health care?
Well, of course, I got a different take on it, I guess, a little bit, because you guys never heard of the endocannabinoid system until about 20 years ago when I taught you it.
In the patients out of time.
The way this went down was that a lady named Ann Hewlett, working as a researcher, medical researcher at the University of Indiana back in 1989, okay? Catch the date, because I'm going to give you another date in a minute. She found out that we have receptor systems in our body, 1 and 2. Basically, 1 is up in your brain, 2 is everything lower than your head. But these receptors are there for endocannabinoids. Endo, from the Latin, means self-generated. Cannabinoid is compounds, self-generated compounds. The endocannabinoid system, as Paul has pointed out, is not only in all mammals, vertebrates and invertebrates, it's in every creature living on the face of the earth except insects. Insects do not have an ECS. Everything else does. Whales, your dog, and your daughter have an ECS. It's very, very important. As it was said, the endocannabinoid system runs every other system. It teaches you how to breathe. It takes care of your neural system. It runs your immune system. If you don't have that thing running homeostasis in your body, you're screwed. Ethan Russo, famous MD, cannabis MD, says that the reason we need to take cannabis in as a medicine is because we have an endocannabinoid deficiency, right? Our ECS system isn't running 100%. Well,
So
if you
you
listen to what I just said, if my
phytocannabinoids
endocannabinoid
or
system's not 100%, then my immune system's not 100%. My pulmonary system's not 100%. So how do I get that up to 100%? I use cannabis. And that adjunct medicine, I think Mike used that word, that adjunct medicine comes into your body, boosts your ECS up to 100%, and you're good to go. So keep in mind, it's everywhere. When you eat a steak, when you eat a fish, that critter has had an endocannabinoid system, and so do you. So it's mucho important that we understand this. All right, now, let's go from 1989 to 2010. In 2010, because I knew, I invited an MD named David Allen to speak at a patient-centered time conference in Tucson, Arizona. And he did so. And here's what David did. In 2009, he had his students, he was a professor somewhere, and he had his students call all over the country to every medical school in the United States. There was something on the order of 537 of them or something like that. And not one of them, after Ann Hewlett had discovered the receptors and therefore the system, 11 years later, not one medical school in the United States had a course that had any conversation at all about the endocannabinoid system or medical cannabis for that matter. And no nursing school did. So just 12 years ago, you had an entire medical nursing community that didn't know shit about shit. They're making all their decisions based on everything, and they don't even know they got an ECS that they're dealing with. Yeah. Now that's changed. The University of Vermont, the medical school there was the first one in the country after, second one in the country after Temple in Philadelphia that put in medical cannabis. Now there's courses all over the country. Everybody's bragging up, come to my school and I'll teach you about it. But that's only been in the last 12 years. So we have a long way to go because as some of you have indicated, everybody on this show, I'm telling you, knows more about the endocannabinoid system than the next doctor you meet on the street. And that's a problem. That's a big time problem. It's what Jason is up against in Hawaii. It's what Pearson is up against in Alaska. It's all over the place. They don't know what we know. And it is imperative that we continue the educational process that all of us are involved in. And whatever you think we've all done, we're not done yet, but you guys are on the right go. And I'm so happy. When I started this shit up years ago, what I wanted was to end up right where I am today, talking to a bunch of people like you that know what the hell they're doing and are going to take over and do it right. And so Jason can thank us for being there, and I'm thanking you, man, for being there now. It takes us all, and thank you so very much. And that's what I think of the ECS.
It's funny you mentioned the steak because something a lot of people forget. Up to, even just 100 years ago, most of our food and feed was fed through hemp and hemp seed. And so, for the bulk of our history, everything we ate, our chickens, our cows, they ate hemp. They ate hemp seeds and stuff, and that's how we consumed a lot of it. And it's only been in the last 100 years we haven't had that in our food every day. And, there's a whole lot of other things happening in the last few hundred years, that would go to show you that it was probably an important thing to keep in our food.
In fact, most of the animals that are being domesticated were domesticated by hemp farmers. And one of the reasons those animals allowed us to domesticate them is because we fed them hemp. From horses in Scythia, chickens in China, pigs, we fed them hemp, so we were able to domesticate them.
Well, and my dog's in Northeast Portland because I make my own dog food and I put my backyard grow into their dog food.
Uh-huh.
The world truly ran on hemp in the beginning. It was the first true power source.
I notice in my garden that dogs like to dig up the roots and eat the roots for whatever reason. There must be something really good in there they like. But anyway.
I'll say one thing about the cannabinoid receptor system. You might forget facts, you might forget dates, but you don't forget discovering stuff. You don't undiscover something. When we discovered the endogenous cannabinoid receptor system, it was like, discovering something within ourselves, and it is discovering something within ourselves. And the fact that it's connected to a plant is not a coincidence. The way that the world unfolded and unfolds, we have a very strong relationship with that plant. But the discovery is just going to get bigger and bigger. That's for sure. It can't go the other way. I take that as a certain hopeful thing to add to what Al was saying about, and I totally agree with what Al was saying about the education level. But we have a long ways to go. It's just getting started now in a way, really, I think.
Yeah, it opened a window. The discovery of the
For the
endocannabinoid
ladies
system.
in the audience, I'd like to point out something that was brought up. It's very important. For the ladies in the audience, Dr. Meshulam, he's gone now. We just lost a great man. But his laboratory in Jerusalem for the last 40 years has worked on cannabis. And one of his primary researchers, again, was invited by me in 2004 to come to Virginia and give a report on breast milk, mammal breast milk. And what she had discovered that was using mice is if at the birth of the little mice, the babies, she removed the endocannabinoids from the mother's breast milk, the mice would not suckle. They wouldn't suckle. They just die.
Yeah.
If
it's
she
like
put the
Vioxx.
endocannabinoids back in the mother mouse's breast, the little pups would suckle again. Now, to go with that, think about Jamaica. Is a wonderful woman named Melanie Dreyer, an RN, a PhD, years and years ago, working for NIDA, the National Institute of Drug Abuse, which is so anti-cannabis you can't friggin' believe it. But anyway, they funded Melanie to go down to Jamaica and prove that mother's milk sucked with it was used by women that were using cannabis. The women in Jamaica that use cannabis just as part of their life in Jamaica are called Roots daughters. And the Roots daughters use cannabis before pregnancy, during pregnancy, and after pregnancy. And Melanie studied the children of these women and found that they were all either average or above average at birth and 10 years out. 10 years out. And the first thing these women, think about Dr. Meshulam's Jerusalem study, the first thing these Jamaican women give to their little babies, their infants just born, is not the breast. They give them cannabis tea. Cannabis tea, which the baby takes. It's got the cannabinoids, right? They take the tea, it's got nourishment in it, then they put the infant on the breast and the kid goes to town. So you women that are out there and you think, well, this might be bad for me or my child to be born, it is not. Look up the history. Dreyer is her last name, D-R-E-H-E-R.
Al, I'm so happy you mentioned that study because before I gave birth, I found that study and I utilized cannabis while pregnant and afterwards to survive all of it, both children, and my children are thriving because of that study. So thank you for bringing that up because that is probably the most important study out there for women who have children and give birth. So thank you for that.
When they came up with the prescription Vioxx, it was supposed to be a great new drug and it was released and it blocked the endocannabinoid system. And pretty soon they found that people using Vioxx died because they had a blocked endocannabinoid system. So they pulled Vioxx off the market. But still, doctors don't know that much about them, the stuff. And in fact, in drug testing, anytime someone goes through a urine test, they don't test for THC, active THC in the system. They search for metabolites of cannabinoids in the urine. They've already been processed and made inactive by the liver. But everyone has a background of about 15 to 25 nanograms of cannabinoids in their urine, and so you don't get a positive drug test unless you're over that 25 or 35 nanogram limit because because of the body's endocannabinoid system. Let's go to Pearson Crosby, who's been quiet and hasn't talked much on this show. Pearson, you're way up in Fairbanks. I guess the days are starting to get longer up there than it is for the rest of us. Tell us about your experience with cannabis in the endocannabinoid system.
Well,
I hate to put you on the spot.
I mean, it works great. No.
Yeah,
It's all
let's
right.
fill it.
Wasn't sure if I was going to answer the daylight or the endocannabinoid
Just jump
question,
around,
but
whatever
yeah, I
you
think.
want.
Sunrise was 3:45 a.m. this morning, so we are having a lot of daylight. I don't think we'll have nautical twilight for the next I think 70 some days. So when it comes to the specifics on the endocannabinoid system, I think it works great. I am big spot because not because I guess I'm I should be a little bit more up to date with it. I've actually
Well, we're
I think
glad to have you on here, and admire your work with Mike and the Veterans Council.
Thanks. I think when it comes to doctors not being aware of it, and it's something that really needs to be brought up much more, that the caregivers, the people that are responsible for our health, don't have classes on it in medical school. And when it comes to VA the VA it is so difficult for a male veteran to get seen by an endocrinologist when it comes to hormones or testosterone with the VA. It's really hard for them to get a referral. And there are two major things that I think are extremely important for the for any human being. And I think it's just we're looking at how to fix the symptoms rather than cure the problems. And like I said, I'm not very in the know with the technical capabilities of the endocannabinoid as we have it.
As a Marine, right? So you were fighting the wars in the Middle East, I believe.
Yes, yeah, I deployed to Iraq twice.
So how does cannabis help you in dealing with post-traumatic stress in your health? Does it stop the dreams that torture war veterans?
In Philadelphia, I was prescribed everything I asked for when it came to opiates and benzodiazepine, and I got heavily addicted to it. I had issues getting into inpatient rehab to get off of what turned into a heroin addiction. And after giving up these attempts of going into an inpatient facility to get off of the opiates, I ended up locking myself in my apartment for a month with a big bag of cannabis, and it gave me that edge I needed to get through the withdrawal. And so I did start using it to help with pain and physical ailments, things that I was dealing with that in a way to replace the heavy medications that they were prescribing me. But I've come to realize through just over a decade of advocacy work and interacting with veterans and people, and not just veterans, I think we need to start including first responders and police officers, the benefits that they realize from cannabis, or their loved ones utilizing cannabis. New Jersey now allows officers that the opportunity to use cannabis without fearing prosecution or being fired. So it's something that's growing. I think it's really made leaps and bounds since, like, even when I was in high school. I graduated high school in 2004, and I was arrested a year prior to graduating high school for having a couple plants in my room. And
Was that
one of
in
the
Alaska?
officers that arrested me. No, that was in Pennsylvania.
Oh, okay.
Uh,
They wouldn't have arrested
one of
you
the
in
op-
Alaska.
No, they wouldn't have been able to kick down my door in Alaska. The 19th Amendment, the Right to Privacy Act, is something that's very, very.
Yeah, Alaska's Raven versus State ruling that made marijuana
Yep.
legal from 1975 till 91, when the George Bush Senior administration paid a bunch of school teachers in Alaska to file an initiative and overturn Raven. It was based on that right to privacy ruling.
Yeah, it was. It is a whole different world up here. I moved up here in 2015, and living in Philadelphia. I was born and raised in Philadelphia, in the suburbs of Philly. And after the Marine Corps, I spent a couple more years in Philadelphia and came up to Alaska. And it's like night and day. I mean, you're able to be,
Free is the best
that's a good
word.
way. Yeah, exactly. Common sense is valued heavily up here. I was at a VA appointment earlier today, and I was talking to one of the social workers, and we were discussing how much easier it is in Alaska to get things moving. So the community care program that is throughout the United States now with the VA, it actually started in Alaska.
Oh.
I think it was a Choice Act, or the Choice Program, because we have hundreds of native villages and also the highest veterans per capita population in the country, and we're able to be flexible like that. We're not hindered by policy or outside influences that are put in place that might be put in jeopardy if something gets put into play that might cost one industry some money in the long run. We still have that ability to be flexible and change things when needed. And it's something that is well received up here. There's a lot of things that impacted the country when it came to COVID, and some of the movements that went on during that part of American history that didn't fly up here. And I mean that in a way of being able to sit down with either side and not get into shouting matches or turn into violence. I mean, there wasn't one window shattered during the time of these riots and protests that looked like it was happening throughout the country.
We had some of that here in Portland. You probably heard about that. It's getting a lot better now.
Yeah.
Slowly but surely. I'm
Good,
seeing these
good.
homeless villages are
Good. I'm
slowly
glad to hear that.
disappearing. What did you want to say?
I'd like to say, you really highlight an important thing. So many vets get out, and we have all of these like strict rules, and you gotta do this to get the things that could help themselves. But Purdue is just handing out the drugs left and right. Their programs are handed to doctors, they're pushed through, and the drug issue, it causes how many vets are addicted to hard narcotics. How many people in the world die from these drugs every day, and it's mind-blowing how we have these things that can help each other. But because we're not all driven by money, we don't have lobbying systems pushing these through, pushing these doctors to push these drugs on the people, to push these drugs on our vets. 22 vets a day die from suicide because they're not getting the help that they need, and that's why I think psilocybin is such an important conversation of this piece. Cannabis is great for healing the body and easing the pain, and the psilocybin therapy helps you tackle the things that, help you. And, as a facilitator, part of our job is allowing somebody to dive deep into that pain, deep into that hurt, to that struggle, to the things that are causing the stress. And that's why the psilocybin movement needs to be part of this conversation, and we got to start pushing this up more too, because it's going to help that mental health.
You and Jeanette Small, they're
exactly.
in
Oh yeah,
I
couldn't agree more. And in some ways, I think psilocybin and those types and that type of genre of medicine plays a incredible role in healing. I microdosed for a few months at a time, and it just changed my perspective on things. And I mean, I wasn't taking enough mushrooms to be, to actually feel it, but it made my day a little bit brighter, and I was able to get in touch with parts of me that have been suppressed for a long period of time. And when it comes to behavioral health professionals and the way that medicine is given out now, the psychiatrists and psychologists are like the only doctors that don't actually look at the organ that they work on before they just hand out prescription meds that are going to be there, that are this patient would have to rely on for the rest of their lives. These SSRIs, once you go on them, there are very few that won't give you a rebound effect or a slingshot effect if you go off of it. There are several people that couldn't get to their prescription. I know personally there was like flooding or something in New Jersey, and their prescriptions didn't get to them, and by the time that they ran out, and they ended up into an inpatient rehabilitation facility. And not only that, there's a huge umbrella study that just came out in July, done by 3 European universities, that showed that SSRIs have little to no value when it comes to helping with depression. And the only people I believe it was somewhere around 10 to 15% that benefited from it were people that had a generational major depression. And we have the technology now to look at our brains and to see how it's functioning. Yeah. Yet I could call up my psychiatrist right now and get put on SSRIs, and then 2 weeks from now ask them to change it, and they'll never question me about it. All I have to say is I'm depressed.
Paula Noel wanted to address something here about that specifically. Go ahead.
I wanted to say thank you, first of all, for sharing what you have. And the most important thing that I could hear through it is that piece about the pain and the withdrawal from the drugs. And what I've learned through the use of suppositories is that you can use very high doses without the head high, and you can mitigate that physical body, physiological withdrawal stuff, so it can take the edge off. So if you don't have access to other things, getting it into some form into the suppository in a large dose, you can utilize that to mitigate withdrawal and then any pain that you're going through in large doses without the head high, so that you can still have your head.
I have to say that I am a collector of antique medical marijuana containers. And in fact, Michael Kravitz and I often are bidding on some of the same antique medical marijuana, along with our friend Don Wirtschafter in Hawaii, Ben Dronkers in the Netherlands and Asia. But I bring that up because in my collection, many of the bottles from Park Davis, Eli Lilly, Merck from 100, 150 years ago say on the label that this is for habituates of opiates and cocaine, and apparently chloroform used to be a bigger problem than it is now, and for delirium tremens for alcoholics. So cannabis was the main prescription for people who had addiction problems to help them as an exit drug historically until it was made illegal in the 1930s. You know, we're about out of time. I want to give everybody just a minute or two to give a plug for yourself and your organizations. Let's start with Jason. You've been quiet over there for some time. Jason Handley in Hawaii with Care Wailua. How's it going?
Oh, it's going great, guys. And now we're wrapping up, so I'm just going to plug with you guys as well. I'm the owner of Care Wailua Farm, which is out in Oahu. It's the largest patient-based farm in Hawaii. We also run the Oahu Cannabis Farm Alliance, which we call OFCA, which is lobbying to get good laws in place and supporting vets and all that good stuff. We're also working with the nation of Hawaii. They just made me their Department of Veteran Affairs Minister. So it's just going crazy. And I think what's really cool is I keep running into people like you. I feel so connected to all you guys already. I mean, it's insane. Your stories are like mine, like yours. My wife's from Philadelphia. I spent lots of times in Virginia. I got Florida Crippy stories. I mean, this group here is like really engaging me, and I'm super stoked. The bridge is being built with psilocybins. I see them left and right with the vets where they could never even touch base with their feelings, and now they're microdosing and saying, hey, I understand what's going on now. So that's my short plug. I love you guys, and I know we're going to work together really soon. I'm super excited.
Jason Handley with Care Wailua in Hawaii. And a while ago, we had Pearson Crosby in Fairbanks, Alaska. Michael Kravitz, go ahead and give us a plug.
Thanks, Paul. And I'm glad you gave me a minute for this, because the Veterans Action Council is this kind of ad hoc group of vets that started out under COVID and has lived beyond. And we've actually gotten to get really good at doing some really cool stuff. We create some really interesting documentation. We've actually done more to create fraternity than I think the American Legion has ever done for me. And we're going to Capitol Hill. We're going to be going and speaking truth to power. We've done so at the UN and elsewhere. It's completely open to vets. I encourage you to, if you're listening, if you're on the show with us, for you there in Hawaii, I would encourage you to come and at least visit the council and say hello, talk about your work, get to know everybody, and join the council if you feel. That's the way it works, and together we can do some pretty amazing things.
Thank you. Michael Kravitz in Virginia. Al Byrne in Florida now. You want to plug the Veterans Council or anything else?
Yeah, I'm going to plug the Veterans Action Council just like Mike did, and I agree with him that if you're interested in veterans medical cannabis work, you should check in with us. We meet at veteransactioncouncil.org. You can find us on Facebook and all that. We meet publicly in what we call a roundtable every other week. But veterans veterans only are welcome on Mondays and Wednesdays for private conversations with a lot of the guys you see right here. The other Thursday, Friday things we do every other week are for anybody. But we veterans talk veteran shit differently. Veterans will understand what I'm saying. The only thing I want to brag up is I haven't done it yet. Michael's heard this. Pearson says, yeah, sure, Al. I got a book being published.
All right.
And it's about veterans and cannabis. The name of it'll be out this summer. The name of it is For Country and Cannabis. And it's an autobiography. It's a story about an autobiography of medical cannabis. It's not an autobiography of Al Byrne. I just was a vehicle that told the story. But the story's about some of the people that Paul's mentioned that you don't even know their names. Norman Zinberg, I mean, a hero. But who the hell knows who Norman is besides some of us? Well, the book is written so that Jason and everybody else that doesn't know how this all went down and who did it will have a record of that. So I'd like you to look forward to that.
I will. And, I'm going to have to get an autographed copy. Maybe
I don't
in
think
person. I'm definitely going to get an autographed copy from you, Al. So I'm definitely going to get an autographed copy from you.
You will definitely get.
So Jeanette Small.
You'll get one. You'll get one. And if I make any money, that's not the intent. It's all going to go to some dog issue. It'll go to saving some canines, military canines or something. It'll be something like that.
All right. Jeanette Small, you want to say anything in closing? You haven't had a lot of time to talk here, but go ahead.
You know, I'm just visiting your guys' show, really. I would like to plug the service center that I'm about to open. I'm, in the process. The name is going to be Lucid Cradle. And you will be seeing service centers popping up, and you will be seeing a lot of providers coming in and trying to help out. And so I'm going to tell you what makes me so special. I do have a clinical degree, actually. I do have a PhD in clinical psychology with emphasis in somatic psychology. And prior to getting into psilocybin work, now that it is newly legally possible, I have worked in a variety of social services. I used to run a group home for teenagers, co-eds, ages 11 to 18, working on reunification with their families, most often, violent offenders. I've also worked in psychiatry under a psychiatrist specializing in opioids addiction. He was one of the first 6 who were allowed to prescribe Suboxone. So I do have quite a bit of breadth in a lot of the issues that folks experiencing post-traumatic stress have to deal with. And
Does your
I have a lot
organization have a website? Is there a website we can point people to?
Well, hopefully this weekend I will get a website done, and I will tell you that my organization is sitting right in front of you, talking to you right now.
All right. Well, thank you.
That's me.
Well, I look forward to talking to you more, all of you, maybe on an individual basis or panel basis some more. Willie T.
Yeah, so Willie T, and we are, psilocybin facilitator, opening a service center and a manufacturing facility. You can check us out at tripsoregon.com, and we are also the Psilocybin Facilitator Association. Website for that should be up next week. That's psilocybinfacilitatoroassociation.com, and trips.com with a Z, just so you know, trips.com, and that's what we do. And I look forward to, just continuing the conversation about advocacy for mental health through psilocybin therapy, and just even, both aspects, not only just the mental health through the therapy, but also just a new way to enjoy life. There are some people too, I think one person did not want the word disorder added to it. A lot of people are afraid to get help when it comes to a disorder or depression, and we hope to kind of bridge that gap, that people could come in, get some services, and kind of go down the flow of learning to heal themselves. And I hope we had that.
What about you, Paula Noel McVie? Is there a plug we can send interested people to?
Yes, it's backdoormedicine.org. I'm also on Instagram at backdoormedicine and YouTube. I'm a researcher, consultant, and educator. And I also, through this conversation, I really feel like I want to initiate a research study on the use of high-dose suppositories and vets going through withdrawal. I think cannabis suppositories can help in the interim while things are being sorted out. So I would really love to initiate a research study on that.
Thank you, Paula. I want to thank all of you for coming in here today and helping us experiment with this Zoom panel interface. Looks like we've worked out a few of our plugs. I'm Paul Stanford, longtime host of Cannabis Common Sense. In fact, this is the end of show number 1,150 shows that we have done since 1996, October of 1996.
Hey, hey.
So we've made a world of difference. I want to thank you guys for watching and keep working to restore hemp.
Yes.
Good night.
Peace.